So, the Premier League is done for this season. Let's take a look at my Premier League predictions that I did at the start of it all, before we had any idea just how bad and good some teams were going to be. Who thought Nottingham Forest would get European football? Who thought Man United would be so bad? Probably quite a few people, to be fair, on that one. But Forest will be playing European football. It may not be the one that we thought we were going to get, but when you stand back, you realise, ooh, it's actually quite an incredible achievement, really. And these things behind me become very, very relevant because we're going to be playing European football. I mean, not a Champions League final. Give that a couple of seasons, we will. Thank you very much to Raddad's mate for supplying me with these for at least this video. They look pretty good. Anyway, in 20th, I had Southampton. I got this one bang on. I don't think many people did get this one incorrect, to be fair. It's Southampton. They very nearly, very dangerously tried to beat Derby County's record. So I, for one, am very happy they got 12 points. I think from the start they were destined to fail. Russell Martin, good manager in the Championship, but even there he got criticised. So in the Premier League, not changing. We saw it with Forest in the first year with Cooper. Tried to play in the same way as we did in the Championship. It just doesn't work. You've got to adapt. He didn't. It cost him big time. Ivan Juric just didn't have any impact on that team at all. And they did actually end up having a few spirited performances towards the end of the season, drawing with Man City, giving Arsenal a go on the last day. So, you know, there was elements where they looked alright, but overall they were way, way at their depth. In 19th, I had Leicester City. Of course, they came in 18th. It doesn't really make a difference that they were also destined to fail. Signing Steve Cooper, of course, wasn't really going to work with his connections to Forest, obviously. I think that was always going to add pressure for him. But at the same time, he couldn't have done any worse than Ruud van Nistelrooy. He didn't really get a fair crack. And Van Nistelrooy ended up not scoring a single goal for 8 straight games. And before the game that they last scored in, before that run, it was another 7 straight defeats. So, pretty bad. He's not likely to stay for next season, and I do worry for them in the future. Possible points deduction next season. They probably would do alright, you'd think, but it's going to be a bit turbulent still. 18th at Ipswich. This looked like it was going to be correct for most of the season actually, but they came 19th from a really poor end to the season. They were always hard working, at least whenever I saw Ipswich play, they put up a good fight and never really, you know, gave up too much, but they certainly had some poor days this season, and just overall they were definitely at their depth. I think they can do well next season, but how much key personnel will they keep hold of? Liam Delap, Leif Davis. I wouldn't mind either of those at Forest, to be fair. They're definitely going to lose some big players in the summer, you'd think. 17th, Brentford. They actually came 10th, so a big jump here, 7 places out. I knew there was a solid side in there, but last year they were flirting with relegation. So it's not really a stupid prediction, it's just it could have gone either way. And again, Wissa and Mbromo, incredible partnership together, one of the most deadly in the league. You'd surely think they're going to lose at least one of them in the summer as well. Thomas Frank has been linked with them either way as well. They actually scored the 5th most goals in the league, 66 goals. So a very good return for Brentford, a very solid side, but in the end they just couldn't quite challenge for those European places. 16th, the second one that I have bang on correct, in Wolves. It's not too hard to get that right, I suppose, because they've been kind of battling down the bottom end the last few seasons. An awful start of the season with Gary O'Neill, but of course Victor Pereira really turned things around, got them playing some great stuff, and had a really good winning run towards the end of the season. They won 6 games in a row, which is a club record for them. So can they kick on next season? Of course they're going to lose Vitesse Cunha probably to a much bigger club. They came 1 place higher than them in Man United. In 15th, I had Nottingham Forest. They came 7th. Okay, that might sound a bit disappointing based off where Forest were most of the season. But when you say it like that, I said 15th, other people said lower. 8 places out, you know, it could have been more, of course. I'm disappointed we didn't get Champions League. I'm disappointed we couldn't even get Europa based off how long we were in the Champions League spots. Of course, with some of the level of the teams in the Conference League, Forest should genuinely be doing pretty well in it. So, you know, you're playing against lower level sides, but there's still some decent teams in there. It's not like they're all just farmers. There are some good sides in there. So it's not going to be a straightforward thing for us, but yeah, I think it's a good start, really, honestly, when you think about it, for European football. Big summer's needed, though, for us, of course, and obviously I'll go into it a lot more on the channel throughout the summer transfer window, so stay tuned. 14th, I had Fulham. This one was 3 places out. They came 11th in the end. Far too inconsistent. In fact, that's an understatement. It's very unusual to watch Fulham this season, or it was, because one minute they'll beat Liverpool at home, the next minute they'd lose a game that you just think surely they should have won that or done a lot better. They were very, very hot and cold. They did beat us both times. A good team with a lot of potential, and if they play at their best a bit more often, could have easily have challenged for Europe, and they were at times, but just far too much inconsistency. Everton, I got this one correct as well. They came 13th. That's where I said they'll come. I think first half of the season I would have been lucky to get that right if Sean Dyche was still the manager, because it was an awful first half of the year. One of the few teams that lost to Southampton, so that says how bad they were at the start of the year. But since David Moyes returned to the club, they've put together some really impressive form and some really impressive results. They've only lost to Liverpool and Man City in the league since January, when he joined the club again. That's really impressive when you look at it like that. But a good season overall for them, with the 4th best defence as well. They're very rock solid at the back. Bournemouth, I said 12th, they came in 9th, a very good season. It could have been more. They had a bit of a rocky period not too long ago, second half of the season, which overall cost them a serious European sort of charge. And at times they were flirting with even like Europa League 5th, 6th position. Ended up kind of tailing off, but still a very exciting team when they're in full chap. I mean, I try not to think about Bournemouth, playing well. But yeah, Irola is a very popular figure with the Bournemouth fans, and I completely understand why. Did an excellent job for them. They can keep hold of key players. Of course, they've already lost Dean Howson to Real Madrid, which, how many times have Bournemouth sold a player to Real Madrid? Probably never. In fact, they definitely haven't. They've already lost one key player, but let's just hope for their sake they can keep together that team and then build from there. Crystal Palace, it may sound like a boring 12th place finish. I of course said 11th, only 1 place out, but I think that is kind of a false position really, because they had a poor start to the season and that overall cost them. This is of course still with Oliver Glasner. Poor start to the season after having a great end to last season. You thought, okay, they can kick on here. It didn't quite work out that way at first, and then you just saw they really just gradually got better and better throughout the season. They had a couple of low moments, lost 5-1 to Arsenal, for example, 5-2 against Man City, but then they beat Man City in the FA Cup. Crystal Palace won a trophy, and they're going to be playing European football. I'm not a Crystal Palace fan, if you couldn't tell, but I genuinely think that's a really exciting prospect, and I think they could do alright in the Europa League. Brighton, I said they'd be in 10th. They came 8th, of course, just missing out on European football. Again, a bit like Bournemouth, a bit like Fulham, just too inconsistent to seriously mount a European charge. They were definitely in and around it at many times of the season, and with Fabian Hürzeler, a very unknown manager going into the season, no one was really quite sure what to think of them. That 7-0 against us, I'm not just trying to mention Forest again, but was quite a significant moment for them in the season. I actually think that made them better, because since then they had a really good run of form and they believed that they could get European football again. Of course, they fell short, but I think, if they can just be a bit more consistent, they definitely could get back into those European spots. In 9th place, I had Chelsea. This might sound a bit dramatic, but Chelsea, of course, were off the back of a couple of very poor seasons, finishing 12th. But most of last season, they were a lot lower than 6th under Mauricio Pochettino. Of course, he was sacked, quite wrongly, I think. Enzo Maresca ended up doing a decent job, having joined from Leicester, of course. But with a young, pretty unproven team, to get 4th place and have a good end to the season into the Conference League final, which really shouldn't be too much of an achievement with the other teams in that tournament. I think could be a great season for them to get back in the Champions League, to then win a trophy, obviously one they wouldn't have won before. Yeah, I think that can't be too bad of a season for Chelsea. West Ham, a really poor season from them, very underwhelming. Lopetegui really didn't work at all, and then of course Graham Potter coming in, I don't really think has been all that much better. They've maybe been a bit more steady and solid, but far too inconsistent as well. A lot of West Ham fans are quite disgruntled from what I can tell. So I don't really know what their vision is now. Is it to get back in Europe or just stabilise? I don't really know. Too many average players in that squad. There's only really Bobarín, who I think is top class in that team. I don't know how he's not in the latest England squad. 7th, Man United, of course, 8 places out. They came in 15th. What an awful season. What a disastrous season for Manchester United. You could do an entire video on this. There's that much to talk about from them. Ruben Amorim coming into the club after Erik ten Hag just ran out of steam. I don't really think he could have done any worse, to be honest, than Ruben Amorim, who, okay, young manager, not a lot of experience, but very stubborn as well, doesn't really change his ways. And I think the situation United are in, they need to be adaptable, and he's trying to play a brand of football that the players aren't there to play that brand of football. And I just think there's too many average players in that team. There's only a handful of players that you look at and think, yeah, he's alright. And their new stadium plan looks like a circus, which is quite ironic, really, because that's exactly what Man United are. Newcastle, they came 6th. They did look like they could have easily come a lot lower than this at times, and even higher. They were 3rd going into the last couple of games, but the first half of the season they were quite underwhelming, roaming around 10th, 11th, 12th position, but winning that League Cup really propelled them on, and they ended up getting a really solid and comfortable finish in the end. And getting back in the Champions League is fantastic for them. Of course, no distraction of Europe this season, so they need to get the transfer window correct and make sure they've got that depth, because you saw last time when they didn't have the players to cope with European football and the league, they kind of just had so many injuries and it just didn't work for them. So that's going to be a big summer at Newcastle. Aston Villa, a special Champions League return and performance, of course, in the competition. Quarter-finalists taking PSG to the wire was fantastic, and a brilliant transfer window in January propelled them forward, and they only just missed out on European football, quite controversially. And Unai Emery continues to do an incredible job, but it did cost them in the league, because most of the season they weren't really close to the Champions League spots. They were in and around it, but at times they fell off to like 9th, 10th position because of the European campaign. It ended up being a distraction, which I don't really think Villa fans will be all that bothered about, because they had a great time in it. Spurs, I said 4th. They came 17th. That is 13 places out. That's not my fault. That's Tottenham Hotspur's fault. Ange Postecoglou heavily criticised for his approach. I like Ange. I think he's won them a trophy, so therefore he deserves the chance to stay. But some would argue he should probably go, because this season as a whole was still very disappointing. But Spurs won a trophy. So that in fact he's done that, he may as well get a lifetime contract. He did the impossible. So it would be partly deserved, but also very harsh to let him go when you look at it like that. I think unlike Man United, Spurs have got a lot of good players in that team and a real benchmark to push forward. But to finish 17th, 22 defeats for Tottenham, and the 4th worst defence, yet also one of the best attacks, the 6th best attack in the league. It's just a really messy state of affairs when you look at it like that in the league, and they need to push on next season. Liverpool, I said 3rd. Of course, they won the league very convincingly in the end. Okay, it might be because everyone else wasn't good enough to compete for them, but they were still by far the best team in the league. Arne Slot, of course, coming into the club and only making one signing in Chiesa, who got massively underused in my opinion. So still pretty much the same squad as Jurgen Klopp's, and he won the league title, so fair play to him for that. Trent leaving the club, and obviously a number of key players coming in. You'd think the likes of Florian Wirtz and of course Jeremy Frimpong from Leverkusen both being linked with Liverpool very heavily, so they have potential to really rack things up in the summer and take them to another level. But can I remind you, we're the only team that beat them at Anfield in the league all season, so I'm going to take that away from them. Arsenal, another season really where it was just nearly but also quite far, so near yet so far for Arsenal. Compared to where they were before Arteta and the start of his reign, it's a great season, but to finish 2nd again, and this time not even really put up a fight. Great Champions League run, but in the league just a very underwhelming season. I mean, 14 draws says a lot, that's just not really good enough. Not the ability to kill games got the best defence in the league though when it comes to goals conceded. So there's a real benchmark there, but the fact that they didn't sign a striker in the summer last year or in January is criminal. The fact that they didn't do that, having to play Mikel Moreno up front for a decent period of the season, then Havertz isn't even a striker and he was playing there before. They need a couple of strikers in the summer if they want to kick on, and then maybe they could properly challenge again. And Man City, it wasn't a good season for their standards. The first season without a trophy, the Community Shield doesn't count, let's be real. Years of dominance will always come to an end eventually, and it came crashing to an end really when you look at it. They had a good start to the season, despite being unconvincing. They were still winning games, but then it came crashing down when they were knocked out the League Cup and they lost 5 games in a row. I think they only won 1 in 12 at one stage, and that was against us, which was just typical. But, you know, they had a really, really poor period from like mid-October till Christmas. They were awful, and they ended up kind of, you know, stabilising and becoming a solid side again, but still very vulnerable and not what they were. Obviously losing the FA Cup final as well. Rodri missing as well, I don't think that helped things, but yeah, they need a big summer if they want to get back to where they were. So not a bad set of predictions there. 4 correct. Spurs and United are, you know, being well out, but I think everyone got that wrong. Please let me know how you did in your predictions, if you did them, what you think of my predictions, the whole season, Forest, everything like that. Get it in the comments. There'll be there'll be one more video this week, so stay tuned to that. It's a big one. It's a season montage, which I always love doing, and it's pretty much complete, so it'll be done and dusted for you on Sunday, so stay tuned to that. And I'll be doing a live stream on Friday reviewing the season with a couple of guests, so stay tuned everyone, and up the Rads.